now clear for listening part C? Okay. Now for the second half, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all of you uh, read these questions, okay, and answer these questions in a given time frame, and then I'm going to ask each one of you to describe your answer choices. That would be a concept check for me. It would help me understand if you could get the questions correct, if you could follow the strategy. So just make a note of this context sentence. It is a gastroenterologist, Dr. Veronica. Again, this is a presentation about irritable bowel syndrome and its treatment. Yeah. So this is for a specific disease condition, irritable bowel syndrome, which and the speaker is going to describe the treatment for it. So let us very quickly underline the keywords. Then we will do all 6 questions at a stretch, and then I would ask all of you to explain your answer choices. What general point? This is a typical question prompt of main idea. What point someone is trying to make? Okay, is main idea question. Now again, this is introduction. That means they are going to give you some information about IBS. You have to find out what is her main point. Okay, so here it says now so widespread that it needs more attention. That means it is becoming more common now. There must be a comparison from the previous times. Okay, for example, if I talk about stress, okay, so stress is becoming more common now, and therefore we need more strategies to address it. So similarly, if they tell about IBS, then A is the correct answer. Then it may be connected to stressful lifestyle, and it usually, okay, this kind of words are very important in the answer choices. When I say usually, it means at least 65% of the times. Okay, if I say mostly, it means more than 80% of the time. When I say almost every time, it's more than 95%. Usually is in the most cases, generally. So 65% of the time it responds well. This answer prompt has 2 parts. Can you see this? But then there is a recurrence. Then emphasizes. Today, IBS patients, what is she trying to emphasize? The patients can be more confident about diagnosis. So here we can get to know that in this part of the conversation, so she's going to talk more about the diagnosis and the tests. Okay. So more confident that diagnosis is correct. They have choice. Okay. Choice means you have 6 options to choose from, and more aware of symptoms of similar illnesses, not IBS. Okay, that is why I always try to point out that you can't just go by one word. You can't just go by aware of or aware of symptoms, but aware of symptoms of not IBS but of other illnesses. So all 3 options have a comparison in some way or the other. More confident, more aware. And B says choice of a range of diagnostic methods, and here it says today. Okay, so here also in B also there is hidden comparison, means in the past maybe they did not have the choice, but now they have. This is a sentence completion task as well. You see this first one is a question answer, whereas second is a sentence completion task. Then the treatment. Okay, this is also main idea question. What does the treatment involve? following a diet that permanently excludes. Whenever you are looking at answer choices, be always sure that you are highlighting negative words, extreme words, and blanket words. So negatives permanently exclude is extreme, that they can never ever take. Similarly, making an effort to find substitutes for artificial additives and eating certain food again after a period of avoiding them. Can you see A and C are quite similar? A says permanently exclude. C says no, they don't need to permanently exclude. They can avoid it for a certain period of time and then they can take it again. Okay. And B is particularly about artificial additives. Then here you have a presentation about a patient called Matt, and you have to find out he was skeptical about. Any idea what does the word skeptical mean? Skeptical, doubtful. Okay, doubtful. What was he doubtful about? Again, I would pay attention to negative words, effectiveness of unconventional. What does unconventional mean? Any idea? The word unconventional, what does it mean? Conventional, routine, regular, traditional is conventional. Unconventional, new, modern. Okay. So he doubted the effectiveness of new ways. Then large number of apparently easy solutions. Apparently means seemingly. Okay. Seemingly. They may seem very easy, but they actually may not be. Seemingly. And the idea that condition could be cured by lifestyle changes alone. See, alone here is also extreme word. Okay, or you can also call it blanket word. It can be cured by lifestyle changes. That is a different thing. And it can be cured by lifestyle changes alone, which means you don't need any other form of treatment. You can cure it only by following lifestyle modification. So this is another very important trick that you can use. It's not a trick basically, it's something that helps you understand the answer choice fully without being taken away by one word. Okay, so this is Matt's attitude. Then here it is Sophie's feeling about the treatment. She was so worried that she became more unwell. Then she was willing to only follow part of the guidance. See, only is a blanket word here. That means she was willing to follow the guidelines, but not the full guidelines, only a certain aspect of it. And she was convinced that one type of food was causing her problems. So worried is negative, and so worried that because of that her condition deteriorated. 2 is also negative, that she was not willing to follow the diet fully, only one part. And 3 is she was 3 is more about the reason, whereas A and B are more about the treatment. And finally, IBS patients often wrongly believe that. So this is opinion question. IBS patients' opinion. But what do they wrongly believe? So we have to find out their belief, but not just that. Which belief is wrong? Okay. So the first, what the doctor would be doing here is she would be first giving what do they believe, and then she would say that this belief is not correct, okay, or this belief is mistaken. Okay, so treatment may result in complications. Is it something that they believe? Diet doesn't have to be adhered to strictly, and it indicates an underlying organic weakness. Okay, so two conditions must be met here. One is that it should not be a fact, it should be belief of people. Two, those beliefs should be wrong. The doctor must kind of deny what they are believing. Only then this C would be the correct. B would be then, oh no, I'm sorry, any of A, B, or C, any of them would only be the correct answers when the belief that they have is not supported by this particular speaker. Okay, now let us very quickly decide how would we move from one question to another. So here she's going to give general overview. When she starts talking about test, then you would come to this question. Then if she starts talking about treatment, you would come to this question. When she starts talking about her patient called Matt, you would come to this question. Then patient called Sophie, then this question. And when she starts talking generally about all the patients with IBS, then you would come to this question. Okay, now I'm going to play the audio and I would play all 6 questions at a stretch without any pause.
Good morning. My name's Veronica Schulman and I'm a gastroenterologist. I'd like to talk to you today about irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. As many as 1 in 5 of the UK adult population are affected by IBS to some degree, and it's been the focus of much research in recent years. It's typical for those suffering from the condition to report frequent diarrhea or constipation, or a mixture of both. They also experience abdominal bloating and pain. I'm always surprised more people don't suffer from IBS because many of us lead such chaotic, highly pressured lives and are often unable to maintain regular eating habits, which seems to aggravate the condition. It's difficult to treat, with no single medicine consistently and reliably resolving the symptoms in all cases. To add to the problem, a small number of people have what's called refractory IBS. That's IBS that hasn't responded to the normal first-line treatments. Unlike today, in the past, IBS symptoms were easily confused with other conditions, and the difficulty in making a definite diagnosis increased the uncertainty and therefore the suffering of many patients. So what about making an accurate diagnosis of the condition nowadays? Well, there's a stool test which rules out infection, while an endoscopy will eliminate the possibility of inflammatory diseases such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, which share some symptoms with IBS. A comprehensive history and special laboratory tests will in most cases prove that someone has IBS. The result is that the GP and the patient can trust in the accuracy of the diagnosis, and less time is wasted before starting an appropriate treatment. So next, I'll talk a little about how I like to treat my own IBS patients. It's been known for some time that diet is crucial, but opinions have varied considerably on which foods trigger the condition. I've become particularly interested in a group of starches and sugars, which many patients struggle to digest, and which are clearly linked to IBS symptoms. These starches and sugars are present in some grains, vegetables, and dairy products. Interestingly, they are also contained within one group of artificial sweeteners added to some food, and occur naturally in certain fruits. I start my treatment of an IBS patient by putting them on a strict diet for up to 6 weeks. During this time, all foods with the starches and sugars we've identified as problematic are excluded, and then slowly they are reintroduced one at a time to see if there's an adverse reaction. Common problem foods include wheat, onion, garlic, and broccoli. Up to 75% of patients improve to some degree when they're in the initial exclusion stage. Sugars and starches are found in so many different foods, and it's unlikely that patients will be sensitive to all of them. In fact, it may only be 2 or 3. So, how do patients react to this approach? I'll tell you about a patient called Matt, who lived in fear of stomach pain. He'd almost become frightened to eat anything. He'd endured it for several years and had seen many doctors, and even been willing to experiment with alternative medicine. But none of the treatments had provided much relief. Like many IBS sufferers I meet, he was overwhelmed by the amount of information about nutrition that was available. But he had serious doubts about the very many claims made by companies promoting particular diets as miracle cures. Matt still believed his condition could at least be controlled and desperately wanted to try something that had solid research behind it. He was impressed by the steady and structured methods I rely on. Before seeing me, another patient I'll call Sophie had been told to cut out dairy produce from her diet, but she found it hard to sustain and her symptoms continued, although they were intermittent. By the time she was referred to me, Sophie had become confused about whether dairy was really causing her problems. Her IBS was getting worse because she was so anxious. When she followed my method, she was able to discover precisely which foods were triggering her symptoms, which in her case included beetroot, apples and oranges, all of which she particularly liked, and so was initially reluctant to give up. However, she knew there was no real alternative, and she's now made more or less a full recovery. Patients with IBS are often deeply concerned about the basic health of their bowel and can mistakenly think that it isn't normal in some way. I often have to reassure them that their bowel is just very sensitive and that it won't suffer any long-term damage. If a patient usually follows a diet which controls their symptoms, and one day they indulge themselves by eating something they shouldn't and get some symptoms, that's not going to do much harm. The diet can be resumed and the symptoms will resolve themselves.
Okay, so for this particular video, you will see a post-listening video on Teachable, where you would see my explanation on each of the answer choices.